And that changed everything. And I decided in that moment that when I met the minimum criteria, I was going to go ahead and apply, because the only way it's never going to happen is if you don't apply, right? So I decided I'm going to at least do that. So I did, and NASA completely screwed up, and they picked me, and that's how it happened.
Wow. I love that so much. There's so much that's beautiful in there about representation, right? Right.
Yeah, we usually think about representation. It's talked about in terms of race, but the most important thing for somebody trying to accomplish something is to believe that it can happen. And it's really hard to believe that something can happen if you don't see anybody like you doing it. It's just really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to kind of expand on Kat's question, though, like we say when we're 2 or 3 years old, or not two, well, in kindergarten, right? You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an astronaut. The question then becomes, when we switch it and say, well, who do you think this person might become, right? And so we're sitting around a table. We are having dinner, and we don't know who anybody is. And so we have to guess who people are. And so I didn't even pick you as an astronaut. I picked you as I think a mafia guy, because you were from New Jersey.
Yeah. But a couple of things there. So first of all, you're right, Kat. Most kids do love the idea of being an astronaut, and so I completely crush it at career day. When I go to my kids' like career day at school. I remember when I walked in there, and there's a guy holding a briefcase in a business suit, and he was an accountant, and he saw me walk in my NASA jacket, and he was like, "That's not fair." And the only thing that could take me at career day is if at elementary school anyway, is if the garbage truck shows up and the sanitation workers come in, because they do even better, or if a dinosaur. But
right. Because they have their truck with them. You can't actually bring them onto your spaceship. Is that it?
That's right. I can't bring my spaceship, but they can bring their truck. So, yeah, there's that. But another interesting thing is that I just recently somebody sent me the results of a survey that I think the Pew Research did, or some organization in the United States and China, asking I think it was more like high school kids what they want to be when they grow up. And astronaut had fallen down the list. It was number one in the United States, but it was number one in China. So China, it was number one. They want to be taikonauts or astronauts over there. But here in the United States, you know what number one was on the list? Influencer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Just cut to the chase, right? Like skip all the actual doing.
Exactly.
Just have the influence.
Exactly. Which I found really lamentable. And yeah, I see it. I have students, like PhD students at USC. Well, I shouldn't say plural. There's one anyway. That is thinking about, after they defend their thesis, after doing all that work to learn all that science and be ready to really make contributions, is thinking about throwing it all away and being an influencer. And wow. and it just really strikes me as you don't have to, and there's so many of these YouTubers and stuff that have no real experience, but they're just really good at being excited in front of a webcam, and they see that as a short path to big money, because a lot of them do make it's all about the money. A lot of them do make a lot of money doing that. So I kind of understand that what's driving it, but I do think it's not good for our country.
That's very interesting that you say, influencer comes up, and here's why. I was speaking for like some little tykes and a group of kids in an elementary school going up to, like, I think it was 5th, 6th, and 7th, or 6th, 7th, and 8th. It doesn't matter. And I was just asked to come in. I had a free day back in Colorado Springs, and I went over. The teacher asked me to come over and talk to the class, and they made an assembly of it. And as an amputee, I take my artificial leg with me, and my artificial running leg, and I'll show myself running on a video, and so they can kind of see it, so I don't have to run anymore. But that's what I do, and I pull my pants leg up, and I show them, I let them touch it and everything. And so about a week later, I asked the teacher, I said, so what are the kids talking about? And I just wanted, how did they respond to it? Just give me some feedback on that. said, yeah, so it's interesting that 5 or 6 of them said they didn't believe you were an amputee.
Wow.
They thought you were lying about that. They thought that
Even though you showed them.
even though I showed them. I mean,
Wow.
the truth of the leg right there. Let them hold it in their hand. I just don't think I think he's faking us, or that, what they saw me run and won the silver medal. They touched the silver medal, right? And they just didn't believe it. I was like, wow, we have gone so far down this hole of just not believing what's the thing that's right in front of us.
You're right. And I see that too. And it's interesting. In some ways, it's good in the sense that I think kids these days have the freedom to kind of make themselves, at least in kind of a fantasy virtual world, whoever they want. They actually can kind of live their avatars, but they're getting so used to that, and that when the truth comes and stares them right in the face, they have a hard time dealing with it. I think. I'll give you another example. I'm in this Dungeons and Dragons group with my son. Okay,
Yeah.
every Wednesday we go down into our local mall and we play. And our dungeon master, she goes by the name of Loki, the character from and so her avatar is Loki, and from the I guess what it was. I'm not really up. Is it the Avengers or
Yeah,
Marvel, whatever,
Yeah.
Marvel? So I'm not too hip with this stuff. But anyway, she goes with that, and the other guy has like a clown jester avatar, and he goes with that. And so my on Discord, the little thing we use to communicate with each other, my little avatar is a picture of my official NASA photo, and I think they just assume that it's fake, that I just photoshopped it, right?
Wow.
And so I even started, like the other day I was talking about my podcast, and they asked me what was the name of it. I'm trying to be on the DL with this whole thing. I just want to be a normal guy with his kid playing Dungeons, a normal guy playing Dungeons and Dragons with his son. And they they were like, they asked me, I mentioned my podcast at some point. I have a podcast, and they asked me the name of the podcast. I'm like, because the name of the podcast is Two Funny Astronauts. So I said, oh yeah, the podcast is Two Funny Astronauts. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Like again, now I'm thinking like they still think it's like I'm making this up, right? And you showed them physical evidence, right? And
Physical
they
evidence.
So this, I think this is the fact that they're living in this kind of virtual world so much with social media. Fortunately, it looks like this whole metaverse thing is not really taken off in the VR, because I think that would have taken it to if that was successful, that would have taken it to a whole nother level. And there's just this disconnect with reality, which in the case of kids fantasizing about being superheroes, that maybe that's cool, maybe that's empowering, maybe that's good for them. I don't know. But when it comes to the like all this disinformation and these conspiracy theories, it's incredibly dangerous when reality is and misinformation you can't distinguish between one or the other, or you willfully ignore the difference from one to the other. And that's a really scary thing that's happening recently, and it's probably with AI only going to get worse, I hate to say.
It makes me think about one of the things that my father always used to talk about, a very wise man and a journalist, was one of his favorite science fiction stories was a story called The Cold Equations. And I'm not going to be able to pull the author's name right now, but maybe we can put it in the show notes, John, which was about a space mission delivering supplies to a colony somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the spaceship had been programmed, right? It was a little shuttle. So the mast had been set and it just was, on its journey. It couldn't be piloted or shifted, whatever. And there was a stowaway on board. And the story is about how the protocols are, if a stowaway's on board, you jettison the stowaway, because otherwise that's the only option you have, right? The ship will, right? So it's carrying medical supplies to save this colony.
My shuttle crewmates, by the way, tried to do that to me once. I got a little upset.
You couldn't do it. I'll try to make this short.
I'm just holding on to the handrail.
The stowaway turns out to be a 16-year-old sister of one of the colonists, right? So it's this kind of tragic story of um, ultimately the
Don't.
astronaut jettisons her
Oh
because there's
no!
no other
Don't
choice.
spoil it. I want to read. I want to read
Oh,
it.
oh, okay. I just ruined it. Anyway,
Ah.
the point is, well, but the point is in this story that like there are just laws of the universe, right? You know this probably better than I do. And I guess that's the question is the theme that's coming up for me as we talk about this is there's something lovely about being able to fantasize or have aspirational goals and see yourself as beyond yourself,
Mhm,
right? And then there's physics,
mhm.
right? Or there's reality. Um, so I wonder what comes up for you about that, especially this week. You know, I know you worked for SpaceX and you just had a launch that um, I think in some ways was a success. You learned all sorts of things and also it blew up. So I don't know what comes up for you with all of that.
Well, yeah. So that was a really exciting. I feel bad by the way. I never answered
Oh,
John's
John's question
question,
about being
but maybe we
looking
come
like
back
the
to that.
mafia.
Yeah, about the mafia. Maybe we come back to that and tell the story of our dinner at the end of the night. But as far as that goes, yeah. This new rocket that SpaceX launched for the first time. Um, First of all, the rocket itself is if it works, and obviously because as you probably know, it went kablooey. Actually, the technical term is a RUD or rapid unscheduled disassembly. but yeah, it went kaboom, and so obviously there's a long way to go. But if it works, it's absolutely groundbreaking on three different levels. The first is the scale of the thing. It's gargantuan, and that's the obvious thing. It's just it's enormous. The biggest rocket we've ever launched actually was just a few months ago. We launched the SLS rocket, which is the rocket that NASA developed with Boeing, and it's designed to carry our astronauts back to the moon. And it was the biggest rocket ever flown successfully, and it beat the previous record holder, which was a Saturn V, the moon rocket that took our Apollo astronauts to the moon, and it beat it by about 1,000,000 pounds. It had about 8.8 million pounds of thrust when it left the ground, and so that 1,000,000 more than the Saturn V is really impressive. The one we launched 2 days ago, the SpaceX Starship rocket, that has 17 million pounds of thrust when it leaves the ground. So almost twice as big as the biggest rocket that has ever flown, right? So the scale is almost incomprehensible. The other way of looking at it is that it's capable because the Starship part at the top, not the booster, but the upper stage, which is the Starship, that thing can theoretically hold as many as 100 people inside. Now, launching 100 people on one rocket is also mind-boggling because the largest number of people that have ever launched on a single rocket, which was the space shuttle, holds that record right now. And you know what that number is?
It's
Like,
7.
Close.
yeah,
8.
4 or
We actually
5.
once it's usually 7, but once we put 8 people in there, so 8 was the maximum. Now we're talking about going from 8 to 100, right? So that's crazy. So the scale is the first thing. The second thing is it's designed to be completely reusable, rapidly reusable, affordably reusable. So the idea is it's like a commercial airplane. You bring back that booster, it lands on its tail like Buck Rogers. The Starship comes around, does this belly flop, and then lands on its tail. And then you take them, you put gas in the tanks, you fill up the tanks again, you stack them back on top of each other, and you launch again. And if you could do that, so that then the cost of any given mission approaches the cost of the fuel, that will revolutionize the economics of spaceflight, and to change it from tens of thousands of dollars per pound to get something into space to about $100 per pound. So all these business cases, when you chop, 2 zeros off the price tag, a lot of things that were cost prohibitive become, possible, and so that will revolutionize the whole economy of space. And then finally, the last attribute, which makes this thing really a game changer, is the fact that once you get the Starship into orbit, it's not really going anywhere, just like the space shuttle. It has enough to get into orbit, maybe stop by a space station, drop some people off, and then come back home. There's no way like the space shuttle was ever going to the moon, for example. It didn't have enough gas in the tank. It couldn't do that. It could go up to low Earth orbit, very close to the Earth, about 200 miles up, and then come back down. This thing is designed so that you could fill up the tanks after it gets into Earth orbit. So once it's up there about 200 miles and going around the Earth, we can launch tanker ships and refuel it. And once those gas tanks are full again, now you can go from Earth to basically anywhere in the solar system, including Mars. So you could take those 100 people and go to Mars with this thing. So for all those reasons, the potential of this rocket is enormous. Now the question is, can we solve all those technical challenges, which are all things that nobody has ever done before? So can we solve that and actually make it work? And obviously, yesterday didn't get all the way there. They didn't intend to. They really were just trying to test some of the very basic pieces. And it was, even if it was 100% successful, what they wanted to do the other day, it still wouldn't have tested all those things. But it was a first step. And of course, the interesting thing is a big debate going on right now in the media and on the internet, which is, was it really a success? I mean, how do you define success or failure when you're doing something like this? Because you saw when it went kaboom, you saw those SpaceX engineers jumping up and down and applauding, and happy and hugging each other, right? I felt that way too. But then, you get a lot of late night comedians are looking at it saying like, yeah, you how can you call that a success and be happy at your $1 billion rocket blowing up? That doesn't seem to make sense. As one guy in the Daily Show said something like, for those of you haters out there that thought Elon couldn't destroy anything faster than Twitter, you.
Good line.
Pretty funny.
That's good. That's actually good.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that, kind of going back to what we said earlier with, the kids not looking at something that's physically there right in front of them and not being able to comprehend that this is a piece of life that's right in front of them, or being able to connect the dots as an athlete. And then Kat and I have talked about this before. Athletes fail really quickly because they have an end state in mind, and everybody on their circle and their team. I'm in the Colorado Springs right now. We have the Olympic and Paralympic reunion going on this weekend. Mm-hmm. And so having a chance to talk to all these amazing individuals who, gold medalists, silver medalists, bronze medalists, that have really shifted the way they think to receive an outcome. Not too many people get there. They can't think that way. So what are some of the things that you have to think about in failing fast, failing quickly, in order to get to the ultimate, shooting 100 people into space and then let's refill the tanks and go to Mars or Venus or wherever you want to go. Yeah.
So it actually, as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that's a really good analogy to what happened the other day. Is if you're a professional athlete, you could train and train and train and train and train and never go into competition. You could just keep training and trying to keep getting better. But you really don't know what you have, and you really can't really get to your final goal without entering competition. So you could put off going and competing in a, let's say, in a track meet or something. You can put that off and put that off. And ultimately, it's going to take you longer to achieve your goals, right? If you see like baseball players in spring training, you can have a veteran pitcher that goes out there and gets shellacked, right? In spring training, they're hitting the ball all over the place, but he considers it a success because you know what? He got his slurve to work, which is what he was trying to do.
Right.
He wasn't trying to necessarily strike everybody out. He was working on this one piece that is going to be incredibly helpful to him later. He got to work, even though he wasn't really trying to get his fastball over in the zone. Right. So it's kind of like that. That's what we're doing with this rocket launch. We're trying to see if we can just get the engines lit and if the structure is going to work, are the electronics going to work, are the is the propulsion system going to work? The fact that some other pieces didn't work, well, we're still thrilled that we got our slurve. You know what I mean? Right. So that's not a bad way of explaining it. Now that you mention
it. Yeah. Go ahead, Kat. I wanted to.
No. I was just into space. Just to build on this. In improv, we have these phrases that we throw out and that we socialize when we apply improv in organizations. And one of them is celebrate failure, and it's a very easy thing to say when celebrate failure means, you're generating ideas in an improv scene and at the end you go, woohoo, right? Or even in a brainstorming session to say, throw out bad ideas. But in this context that you're talking about, when you're blowing up $1 billion rocket and everybody's going to look at it and all the late night shows are going to make fun of you, but also it's $1 billion rocket, that takes a certain amount of courage to literally sort of put your money and all of that amount of time there. And I remember having a conversation with Dr. Ellen Ochoa at NASA. I don't know if do you know her?
Yeah.
And she was talking about at NASA that they had that they're saying was failure is not an option.
Right.
And I guess what I'm wondering for some of our listeners, how do you, I mean, it's easy to say sort of fail fast or failure, celebrate failure, or, oh yes, this is success, but how do you manage that, right? How do you get a room full of people who can cheer in that moment or who can really learn to lean into that or learn from failure and have that mindset?
Well, a couple of things. One is it's the culture of the organization. So that is, comes from the top and it has to permeate through the whole organization. And that was not happening at NASA. It was quite the opposite, as Ellen pointed out. So the second thing, though, is if you're going to embrace this approach, you better make sure the consequences of failure are low. So, and SpaceX is really good at doing that, creating an environment where you don't have really that much to lose, and then acknowledging that if the consequences of failure are not high, then ramp up the risk that you're willing to take. Right, take it all. Just try it. Don't try to make it perfect. Don't spend years and years trying to get it perfect on paper. Just go try it, because that's the fastest way. The fastest way for that pitcher to figure out if his slurve is working is to go into a spring training game against real Major League Baseball hitters and try it. Right. You could do bullpen session after bullpen session, and you're still not really sure if a major league hitter is going to swing or miss or not, right? Well, it's the same thing here. You could do engineering analysis until the cows come home, and you're still not really sure that the rocket's going to work. It might look perfect on paper, but until you try it, you don't know. And so, look, as far as consequences of failure. So yes, we lost a rocket. That was a pretty expensive piece of hardware, but nobody got hurt the other day when that thing blew up. There's nobody sitting on it, right? That rocket is even though it was expensive, was stripped down so that only the important things were on there. So it's nowhere near as expensive as the rocket's going to be that actually performs the mission when we get it right. And the other thing is we have another rocket sitting in the hangar ready to go. The serial number on that spaceship was 24. The serial number on the booster, the first stage, was 7. No, serial number 8 and 25 are sitting right there. The SpaceX intentionally, and this is very, very different from the way the rest of the industry normally does testing. SpaceX intentionally went into mass production before they even flew the first prototype.
Wow.
So we have engines rolling off the assembly line like dozens at a time. And so we can just move on to the next one if this one didn't work. We have all this hardware to work with. And so you can say that cost a lot of money, but the really expensive thing is not launching that expensive rocket. The expensive thing is letting it sit on the ground and paying everybody's salaries while you try to perfect it on paper. That's what really costs money, and that's why these traditional programs run up their budgets and draw out their schedules, and to the point where they get canceled. And we've seen it happen over and over again with rocket programs, with aircraft carriers and things that just go way over budget. And it's usually because they're trying to make it perfect before they try it. And that's usually the big mistake. And SpaceX doesn't do that. The downside, of course, are the optics of it. You got to deal with everybody making jokes about you. And I remember in the early days, we did the same thing when we were trying to get our first stage back. And the first 6 times we tried to land that rocket. So the idea was the Falcon 9 rocket. It's a much smaller rocket, but the idea is it drops off the payload into space. And normally the 90% of the rocket just falls into the ocean. We throw it away. It's disposable. And the idea was this is really expensive. If we can get that thing back, it would revolutionize the economics of spaceflight. And sure enough, it did. When we were able to do that, and now we get it. Now it's almost anticlimactic. It comes back, we recover it, and we use it again, and that chopped 1-0 off the price tag when we got that working. So and we did the same thing though. The first 6 blew up, but you know what? We had nothing to lose because we were throwing those things away anyway. But people said, "Hey, this is a huge mistake. Your competitors are going to get videos of your rockets blowing up, and they're going to take it to Capitol Hill, show all these senators and congressmen, and say, hey, you really want to put your national security $1 billion payloads on these rockets that keep blowing up, or your astronauts? You want to have them sit on these things?" And at the time, we were like, you know what? The people that have to understand the importance of failure the most are probably those politicians. So we're not going to shy away and worry about what our competitors are going to show them. We're going to make a greatest hits compilation video of our rockets blowing up, and we're going to put it on YouTube. And that's exactly what we did. Oh. And it's still there. You can see it, and just embrace that failure, because it's the fastest way to learn. When that first when that rocket blew up 2 days ago, we figured out that we found out we had some flaws in the design, and we found the weakest links, probably the 3 weakest links, and they're already today, I guarantee you, working on fixing those things. Whereas if we put it on the ground and we continued to just do analysis or try to figure it out with simulations or paper, we might not have uncovered those things, but we uncovered them instantly when we tried it. And that's the fastest way to converge on something that will work, is to just try it.
I'm going to switch gears just a bit, and I don't know if Kat has an activity that we can do in this, but one of the things you said at the dinner we were at, which just, it had me thinking for like the entire week. Mm-hmm. This one thing that you said, and I've been saying to everybody,
it wasn't, wow, this burrito doesn't.
The burrito
use some cilantro. Was that what I said?
Yes, that's what you said. That's exactly right. You said during one of the spacewalks, you got a chance to put yourself in front of the entire space station, mm-hmm. and just kind of hold on in front. And when I kind of was visualizing that, with nothing in front of you, at 144,000 miles an hour flying, around, falling around the Earth, it's just what are the possibilities that are in front of us that are infinite, and I can't even get my head around it. You put in the context of light, and the Earth is, the universe still expanding, right? I have some thoughts around that in particular, but the expansion continues. That's why we can't see it all, right? Because it continues to keep going and keep going and keep going. I just wanted some of your thoughts around, spacewalk and the things that just, okay, this is what we practice for in that ginormous pool that you have in NASA, right? And you're trying to do all the tool work underneath the water, but this is different, right? So the difference of what was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that was an incredible moment. I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. One of the things we tell people that are about to do a spacewalk is that, make a moment for yourself, because it's so easy. We're under so much pressure to get the job done, and what you're really focused on, what your biggest concern is getting it right. I mean, you've been training for years to do this one thing. And another thing we can talk about, John, I'd be curious to get your take on is I've talked to other professional athletes. When I say other, I mean you, not me. I've never done athletics professionally. But when you're getting ready to do one of these spacewalks, you've been training, and you have all these people counting on you, and you're about to go out that airlock, and that whatever happens in the next 7.5 hours is going to basically define you for the rest of your life. You're going to be, an old man sitting in your rocking chair, looking back at that moment, either with tremendous amounts of satisfaction and pride, or a tremendous amount of regret, right? And so I think, and in conversations with people who have done this, they think so too. It's kind of like an athlete taking the field for a championship. Like maybe that's Super Bowl or World Series or World Cup, whatever the or the Olympics, whatever that might be. And you might not get another shot at this. You might never ever get a chance to play in the Super Bowl again, or be in another Olympics. This might be the last one or the only one that you'll have that opportunity. So right before that gun goes off and you start sprinting, that whatever happens in the next few minutes in that case, or in the next couple of hours in the case of a Super Bowl, is going to be monumentally impactful to you and your life story. And how do you deal with that pressure, right? How do you deal with that? Because I know I was in that airlock getting ready to go out there, and I was feeling it. I was really feeling it. And my commander saw me, and I had this like glazed look in my eye, and I got that 1,000-yard stare, and he knew exactly what I was dealing with this, right? So he got up. I had my helmet on, but until you close it, there's a little vent hole right by your ear. And he came up and he grabbed me by the shoulders and put his mouth right over by the vent hole, so that I could see. He says, "Reisman, don't gup." I started cracking up, and he was laughing, and it was perfect. It was like exactly what I needed in that moment. That's why he's the commander. 'Cause he knew that that's what I needed to hear. And then I went out. We did it, and it all worked. And so I'm happy to say that when I'm old, which is not that far from right now, I'll be sitting in that chair feeling pretty good about it. So, but yeah, I talked to Doug Glanville, who was played for the Cubs and I briefly for the Yankees, and he said, yeah, that's what he felt like when he was going out there for the World Series. That he knew that that he felt that crushing weight of this one moment that you have, and not knowing the outcome is maddening.
Going back to what you said in that moment, I did feel that, and only in one instance that I've trained, 19 and a half years for these 6 jumps, which weren't even the 6 jumps that I was preparing for, because I was preparing for the Olympic Games. And with the injury and having the leg amputated, and I'm now in the Paralympic Games with that same feeling that I've now come a whole nother lifetime of training without a leg when I had 2 legs, 27-foot long jumper on one end of the stick, with 2 legs. And then now about be on the precipice of setting an American record. And that, I said, these are my 6 jumps, and had failure on my first one, which could have destroyed everything.
Ooh.
Because I went down a long jump runway and I was a left leg jumper. My left leg is now gone. And somehow I got off steps and off mark and jumped off my prosthetic.
Oh,
think about the force on that joint and everything that's going to hit. It could have destroyed the entire leg. And I was in 4th position after that jump. I said, well, so then I came back and said, well, leg's still good. I said, if I can get in 4th position jumping off my wrong leg, this competition's over, right? So it's just, I think that what you said earlier, you just have to do it. You have to take the long jump run. We have to open the airlock. You have to take the stage in Kat's case and put it in from practice into not from theory into practice, right? So you just you have to do it, and that is your shot. And you've been preparing for it. So you probably said, Reisman, don't this up, and it relaxes you to say, yeah, that's right. So, and you just get out and you go do it. Wow.
Just like you're talking about, you have to somehow take all that weight of all all that pressure and just put it to the side, which can be, it can be very hard to do that, but you have to, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that your story reminds me of is the other thing that they taught us, which is you're going to make a mistake. Yes. Okay. When you go out there, all of us want to go out there and do a flawless spacewalk, because it is physically very and mentally very, very challenging, very, very arduous. and it's pretty much impossible to do a perfect one, right? But we all have that desire. So they say, don't believe for a second that you're not going to make a mistake. You're going to make a mistake. The important thing is not, and the bad thing is not making the mistake. The bad thing is letting that mistake crater the rest of your performance.
Oh yeah,
right.
right.
So if you made that mistake and jumped off the wrong leg, and then when you went back for your second jump, I love the fact that you said, "Wow," you turn it into a positive,
Mhm.
right? So if I can go that far on my prosthetic, just think what I can do, when I do this right. So that's fantastic, but it can be hard to do that. A lot of people, when you make that mistake, fixate on it, and to the point where they're incapable of performing, and they need to continue. If you go out there and you make a mistake early on in your spacewalk, you got like 6-7 more hours to go. So you can't be thinking about that mistake and beating yourself up over it for the rest of the time. The important thing is saying, okay, that was my mistake. I knew that was going to happen. I knew I was going to make one. And I'm going to put it behind me and move on. And the important thing that people will judge me by is not whether or not I made that mistake. It's whether or not I let that mistake get into my head.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can be tricky. That can be hard to do. But I remember I made a mistake like coming out of the airlock. And I'm like, all right, I did it. The way it was like, there it is. Now
Let me back in. Let me in.
No, but I was like, okay, I'm still here, and that nothing bad happened. So let's keep going. Let's I got it out of the way early. Great.
Brilliant.
I love it. Kat, you have a game for us?
Sure. Well, I mean, so the first thing that you're talking about, I love, Ted Lasso would say, be a goldfish, right? So let it go, forget it. And in improv, we talk about the circus bow is our sort of frame for that, right? Which is we make a mistake, whether it's a real mistake or just a mistake in our head, and we go, ta-da, right? So we offer everybody this sort of just ta-da, which is, I made a mistake. I'm going to celebrate it sort of physically with my body. Woohoo!
Right.
There are lots of games that we have that exercise that muscle of mistake will happen, and then I let it go. Mistake will happen, let it go. In improv, it's different, right? It's by definition, we are not prepared, and we're going to make mistakes. It's part of the game. So I do have a game. One of us has to be on the hot seat. And so should I put myself on the hot seat or Garrett? Okay,
that sounds
I'll
good.
be on the hot seat. All right, so here's how this is going to work. Before we started, Garrett, you said, will there be math involved? So I'm thinking of a game that has math involved. And I'm going to put you in charge, but I have to do the math. You're going to be in charge, Garrett, of giving me math problems. And then, John, you're going to make me tell a story because you were talking about great storytelling and how you've appreciated that for me. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to pretend to have a photo album. And John, you're going to ask me to describe pictures in the photo album, right? You're going to say, oh, what's that? And I'm going to start to describe the photos. And then every now and then, Garrett, you're going to interrupt me and ask me to do some math problems. Now, these math problems are not like Caltech level math problems like you would do, just very simple. So the first one might be something like 3 + 4, and then I'll say 7. And after that, you're just going to give me the next half of the equation. So you might say +3, and then I would have to say 10.
Okay.
Right. So what you guys are doing is helping me work both sides of my brain. And I'm going to try to do both of these things at once. If I make a mistake, I'm going to just try to keep going without getting distracted by making the mistake. All right. And you can just interrupt me, Garrett, whenever you want. If you're not interrupting me fast enough, I'll just raise my hand and you'll know that that's your cue to give me another math.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Hey, so Kat, what's in that book that you are? I mean, what's the first photo that's in your photo book?
Oh, this is a family photo album, and this is my grandmother right here.
Is she also on page number 2?
She is actually. This is a picture of her making French toast for me.
Oh my God.
7 + 6, Kat.
13.
And then, when you look at her picture, what did that remind you of? What came up for you?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe
Oh,
you
it
could tell.
reminds me here when
Times two, Kat.
say it again.
Times two.
26. It reminds me of this family trip we took with my dad, where we went to the Catskills, and you can see us here.
And the Catskills.
Plus 2.
28. The Catskills are this resort. You can see me in the pool here. I'm wearing like a little flowered bikini.
And who's that person in the back?
Divide by 4.
7. And in the background is, it's a clown. It's Bozo the clown.
Why has he got
plus 6?
13. Mm-hmm. And why is he a clown? He's a clown.
No, the red shoes. I just got blue shoes. Why do you have the blue shoes on?
Oh, because his red shoes.
Plus 8.
24. And his shoes got wet because he went in the pool. Okay, I'll stop there.
He's too good at that. I would have got a 1.
24 was not right, I'm sure, but anyway.
You got all of them right except for the last one. That was very good.
So that's a game.
Wow, that's hard.
And we use that just to, in some ways, we use it. We can exercise our brain, but also to fry our brains.
Yeah. To
help us, create with that and keep our rational brain or our critical brains busy.
Well, I know that's fantastic. I'm gonna take that game as well. So I know we're running a little bit on time now. I know you got some stuff that you got to do. Big soccer game coming up today, or pictures, and I want to make sure you get off to that. I do want Kat to ask your first question again, because I failed miserably when I started the show because I forgot to hit the start button on live, and so goodness. I missed the first start of the question. So then we can back in with the opening of the show again later. But on this one, if you just ask the first question on the asked,
we have to
Garrett just begin to answer that question, and
All
I think
right.
I got the rest of it. So
I will start again. So Garrett, I want to start by asking you, lots of little kids, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, say, I want to be an astronaut. So I'm just wondering, did you want to be an astronaut when you grew up?
That's funny, because when I was a little kid, I absolutely wanted to, but I didn't think it was possible. And the reason for that was I was watching the Apollo missions. And I used to love watching those things. I'm going to date myself, but I had a Super 8 movie projector. And I had a film of the Apollo 11 mission. And I used to watch that thing so often that I would have to keep splicing it because the film would break. And eventually the weight of like the Scotch tape that was holding it together was greater than the weight of the actual film on the reel. But I watched it so many times and I just loved it. And but I never all those people that I saw on that film were test pilots. And I had a mom who was crazy scared of flying, still is actually. And and I don't mean like flying like F-35s or something. I mean like she was scared of flying on United. Okay. So the thought of her letting her little boy grow up and become a test pilot, that was not going to happen. So when I'm watching these films, I'm looking at these men going up to the moon, and none of them look like me in the sense that I was not going to be a test pilot and they were all test pilots. So I assumed that I can't do this. That was just a natural conclusion because so when I went on and I was always interested in the STEM fields. And if you asked me in high school what I was going to be, I would have said maybe, engineer or maybe scientist, maybe physician.
Yeah.
But
I never, ever would have said astronaut until I was an undergraduate in college. And I got a hold of some of the bios of some of the people that NASA just selected for the space shuttle program. And there were engineers and scientists and physicians in that group. And I'm starting to see people that look like me. And I realized that, wow, maybe this is actually within the realm of possibility. And I resolved on that moment, that was my kind of eureka moment. And I resolved at that moment in time that I would at least go ahead and apply. Because I knew that the only way it was never going to happen now was if I don't apply. So I did. And I got, they say at NASA, failure is not an option. Well, yes, it is apparently, because they failed and they picked me instead of the other qualified people. But it ended up working out. And so I just wanted to yeah, I think it's a good story to tell because it really shows like the importance of representation in the sense that if you don't believe the most powerful motivating force is the belief that it can happen.
Yeah.
And if that is taken away from you, it's really hard for this. And I never would have become an astronaut if I continued to believe that I can't do it.
Yeah. So. I love that story so much. And I'm so glad you became an astronaut because it feels like it was really a wonderful destiny for you. And we got to talk to you and hear about it.
Well, I want to say thank you from both Kat and myself for you gracing us with your time. I love how these conversations go because we just know where they're going to land. And so I'm glad we came back down to earth on this one. And so if you are out there, how do people find you?
Well, the easy way to find me is on GarrettReisman.com. There's a little contact me button up there. And there's links to photos and video and all that good stuff. And then there's also links to our podcast, which we have a podcast too, which we're currently on hiatus, but we have a whole season out there. It's called Two Funny Astronauts. It's myself and Mike Massimino, who you might remember. You might have seen him on The Big Bang Theory. He also went up and did a couple of Hubble missions. So we have a little rivalry. He's a Mets fan. I'm a Yankees fan. And he went to MIT. I went to Caltech. So there's a lot of friction points, but we have a lot of fun with that. And so you can check that out on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. The usual thing. And you can also find me at USC teaching classes. So if you want to sign up and come register for one of my classes, come here. That'd be great. And you can also see me working on For All Mankind, where I'm a technical consultant. Helping put that TV show together and having a lot of fun doing that too. So
fantastic!
Wow. What an amazing show for this our first guest that we've had. So the initial one, the inaugural.
I'm honored.
Yeah, we're honored. We are honored.
That's a big honor being your first guest. So thank you.
Yeah, we got some comments that have come in. Morris Parsons says I'm going to use that exercise for sure. Diana has said, good morning, John, Kat, and Garrett from Tampa. She's going to watch the replay. She was a little bit late, she said this morning, but she's there. So we wanted to honor those folks that have come in and just made some comments on this one. So thank you. I'll take you off the stream now. We say adieu, goodbye to you, golf, and enjoy the soccer and the pictures that you have to do today. Can't wait to see you out there again, my friend. You're lovely, and blessings to you and your wife.
Thank you. Thank you. You too, John. It's really been a real pleasure. And I don't know if we fully explained this, but we actually met at this dinner called the Influencers Dinner, where they sit us all down. We don't know who anybody is, and we have to guess. And it was so much fun. And you sat right next to me, so that I got incredibly lucky to have met you. So I'm thankful for that organization for pulling that off. And Kat, now getting to meet you too is really a pleasure as well. So hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Great.
I guessed absolutely wrong that he was I thought he was a mobster because he's from New Jersey. He looks like a mobster. Doesn't he look like a mobster? No,
I tell you what, I once gave a speech actually in New York for the Wounded Warriors Project. And I did an appearance for that and tried to help them out. And the next person to take the stage, and I basically talked about a lot of people say we're like American heroes for what we did going into space, but I said that always kind of rings false to me because I was doing this just because I was excited about doing it. To me, the real heroes are the people like you, John, that put themselves into harm's way, not for the sake of a personal adventure but for out of a sense of duty and service to the country. So I said that to him, and I talked about all this and about being on the rocket. And I walk off, and the next person that was about to go up there was Tony Sirico. I hope I'm not pronouncing the last name wrong, but he's the actor that played Paulie Walnuts on The Sopranos, right? And he's standing right there, and oh my God, it's kind of intimidating. It's Paulie Walnuts, and he's standing right there, and he puts out his hand, and he goes, "Kid, you got balls." I got that from. I want to put that on my tombstone,
There you go.
Paulie Walnut said.
Fantastic.
And I'm not actually a mobster. Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
no. I was just messing. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And go enjoy your family. And so thank you. We'll just close the show out, and we'll talk to you a bit later.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you,
Bye,
Garrett.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
What an amazing individual. What an amazing human. Wow, just graced by this beautiful soul that's it's funny, and he's just
Amazing.
thinks about things and tells wonderful stories. Didn't he tell? I mean, great stories.
Amazing.
So you've been listening to the Performance Shifts podcast with Kat Koppett and myself, John Register. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today, gained some valuable insights that you can apply to your own life and your own work from Garrett Reisman, who just, if you didn't hear the whole show, go back and we're going to put it together for you to come out in a couple of weeks here on the podcast. But failing fast, we talked a little bit about that, but also in failing fast, you're doing it towards an end state, and you have these moments in time. So any other insights that you had from the show today, Kat?
I just think, I guess the other theme that I would pull out is this idea of representation and being able to see yourself in a role. It's, we think about it, as Garrett said, sometimes in narrow ways as race or gender, but it's so much broader than that. What can I envision? And then how do I make it a reality? And then how do I deal with reality? So I'm sure those will be themes that will carry forward: fantasy and reality, and facing the truth, and then taking the risk to test things and deal with failure as it comes.
So as we get ready to wrap this show up, how do people find you? And then what's you got a small little book that's out there too that continues to help people.
I do. So the book is Training to Imagine. It's practical improvisational theater techniques to enhance creativity, teamwork, leadership, and learning. You can find out about that and other tips and tools at Koppett.com, Koppett.com. And we're going to be doing a public workshop on storytelling coming up, all sorts of other things.
Awesome. And you can find me. I'm on John at johnregister.com. We're just johnregister.com. I have a book out, 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader. Journal Your Way to Leadership Success, right there. It's all in the plastic still. And Kat and I think we'll get a chance to play coming up this week. So that's going to be pretty fun up in your neck of the woods. We had Fernando come on here, senior. He just saw that you were live. So just noticed that you were live. So he said, provide access to the presentation. We will do that for you, sir. And as we get ready to wrap up this show, I say go forth and inspire your world, because go is your command, forth is your direction, inspire is your vocation, because only you can do this work and world, because this is your sphere of influence.
Woo! Hallelujah.
All right. So go forth, inspire your world, everybody. And we'll see you next week here on Performance Shift, the art of successfully navigating change. Bye for now.